Today I'm going to be talking about one of the most haunted rooms in the world and what happens when you go inside of it. This particular account is like 200 years old at this point, but I mean the legend of whatever happens in that room is still real and still very much alive up to this point. So if that's of interest to you, be sure to take your biggest hammer and use to smash the like button, break it. So let's get right into it. So in a late evening in 1840, a young man named Robert Walboy was standing in front of a townhouse in 50 Berkeley Square. 50 Berkeley Square is a very popular place in London at that point in time. It was one of the most fanciest places where rich and famous come to spend their vacation, and then some even live in this place because it was one of the oldest places in London at that point in time. So it had the most priceless and valuable jewelry that people can find at that point in time. So that's why the place was very, very popular. So Robert Walboy and his friends, they went over there to see a guy named Charles Benson, and then when they were in front of this house, they knocked the door and then waited 3 minutes. Nobody answered the door while they knocked. They knocked again, and then suddenly a young middle-aged man opened the door. And the man standing behind the door was actually Charles Benson. He owned this house. He's the owner of this place in Berkeley Square, the 50 apartment of Berkeley Square. He's the owner of it, of this beautiful townhouse that the group of friends were standing in front of. So after he opened this door, after he came and opened the door for them, he had this very surprised look on his face while staring at Mr. Robert and his friend. Was staring at Robert particularly. Was staring at him with this very serious and surprised look that like he did not expect that Robert would still come over there to carry on with whatever he had planned to do initially. But there Robert was standing with a group of his friends. So what he actually came here to do, what Robert came here to do was to actually come and win a bet that he and his friend had made before coming to this town. So they had a bet, and then in order for him to win it, they have to come and spend the night in this particular house. So we're going to talk about Mr. Robert for a minute here. Mr. Robert is actually a guy that likes to go on dares a lot. He likes to take on challenges that seem very, very impossible. He likes to just go on dares, and then he likes to somebody who likes being dared, and then he likes to carry on with it and see whatever is in the end of it. So why he actually came to this particular part of London was because of the history of this townhouse that we were standing in front of. So over the years, there's been rumors and there's been a folklore that a particular room in that building is haunted, and then if you spend the night there, like there's an evil spirit. They actually had a name for it. They were calling the thing the nameless thing. That's what they were calling this creature, this mysterious creature that was living in that room. That it actually come out and then kill whoever was staying in that room. Ever since the original owners left the house, this nameless thing will come out in the night, and whoever was in that room was going to die. So this rumor was very, very popular, and then Robert's friend actually dared him to spend the night in that room because Robert's somebody who does not believe in rumors, who does not believe in the mysterious and strange things in this world. He thought that that was a rumor, that had to be a rumor. There's nothing like the nameless thing that was locking in the room and was going to come out and clean while he was sleeping. So he decided to take on this bet and then come over to this place to come and spend the night in that particular room. That was the reason why they were there. So while standing at the door, Charles looked at Mr. Robert's face and asked him whether he was still willing to carry on with this thing. And Robert was like, yeah, sure, I'm willing to carry on with it. And then Charles said, okay, and then invited them into the room. And then they went into the dining room of that particular building. And then the six friends sat on a chair. And then Mr. Charles actually went upstairs to get something. And when he came back with a metal key in his hand and then dropped it on the table. As soon as he dropped the key on the table, the whole room went silent. Like everybody was just quiet for a moment. Everybody was just staring at this key that Mr. Charles had just dropped on the table. So everybody was just staring at it. And then Charles looked at Robert and asked him, are you sure you really want to continue with this? Robert was like, yeah, sure. As he looked at the pistol, because he was carrying a pistol on him. He looked at the pistol that I was carrying, and he was like, yeah, sure. He's willing to go on with this particular thing that he said he was going to do. And so He took the 6 young men upstairs. All of them followed him upstairs to the second floor of this building, and then he showed them a particular room and pointed to it. And then Robert went with the key, like very very eager. He had this very very eager, look on his face, like he couldn't wait to win this bet so that in the next day he will have a very very good story to tell, and then he will collect the money from his friend or whatever they had betted on. He was very very eager to go and spend the night in his very room so that he can win the bet, because he does not believe that there's any nameless thing lurking around. He does not believe that any ghost can come out and kill him. He doesn't, as far as he's concerned, whatever stories have been told about this room is a rumor. It's nothing but a rumor. He's just not a believer of it whatsoever. So he took the key and then put it in the lock of the door and then twisted it. Mr. Charles, that has been living in this house for a long time, he was a little scared. Like he didn't want to have anything to do with this room. So Charles stepped back a little bit, and then so did Robert's friend too. Although everybody stepped back a little because they were scared. They were monitoring the reaction of Charles, who was the obvious owner of this house. I mean, the fact that he's scared of even coming close to the door shows that there's something spooky going on here. So the same reaction, Robert's friend took the same reaction. The only person that was stubborn and arrogant to not take this reaction was Robert himself, because he's the only person that doesn't believe that anything like that can actually happen in that room. So he was very eager. So while he opened the door, Charles kind of moved back a little bit as if he was scared, and Robert's friend too had the same reaction. They moved back a little bit. Even Robert too, he had the same reaction too. But then when he opened the door and he looked into the room, so that it was just a regular old bedroom. It's a regular old bedroom as it would be in those years. He had old furnitures, and then there was a dresser by the wall that had a mirror in front of it, and then there was a wardrobe for clothes, and then in the middle of the room, on top over the bed, there was a red ribbon. There's a red ribbon coming down from the ceiling. The purpose of this ribbon is actually to call servants, because during these times there was a mechanism that was derived to call servants into the room whenever a nobleman needed help. So you can just pull down this ribbon, and then a bell in the servants' quarter will ring, and then from whatever bell rings, they will know which room you are in. They will know which room needs service at that point in time. So that was the purpose of that red ribbon that was in the middle of the room, so that whenever the person in the room pulls it down, a bell in the servants' quarter is going to ring, and by that bell that rings in the servants' quarter, servants will know which room to go into to provide their services for. So Robert just looked in the room, and he was staring into the room, and then he just smiled and looked back at his friend, who had this very very serious and scared look. By the way, he was very very serious and scared, but Robert was just very very calm, and he just shut the door and then locked the key, and then he went inside. So Charles just stood there for a moment. Charles and the friend stood there for a moment, and then they were looking at each other, because at this point in time the friends were feeling bad, because they were actually the ones that dared Robert to carry on this thing. They were the one that dared him to spend the night in this particular room. So they were actually feeling bad, because they thought that if anything actually happens to him at this point in time, it's going to be partially their fault, because they were the ones that dared him into doing this thing in the first place. So they were actually very scared. They had this worried look on their face. Wow. And then they just stood there and they were staring at Charles for a moment, and then Charles went downstairs and then he told them that there's one more thing he has to show them. So he took them downstairs, and then he took them to the servants' quarter, where the array of bells are going to be. So in this servants' quarter, there are different bells. They're like, I think 10, maybe 10 bells probably, because there's going to be a lot of rooms in this clearly big house. So he told them that he pointed a particular bell to them, that if this bell rings, that means Robert is in the other room trying to get their attention. Maybe something is wrong or whatever, that they should just monitor this bell, so that if it rings, just in case it rings, is a sign that Robert's going to need their help or something is wrong. So he left them alone in that room, and then this group of friends, they sat down in that place, and then they were very very anxious and nervous, but to calm down the tension, they decided to play blackjack. They decided to be quiet while playing blackjack, because they want their attention to be focused on this particular bell, so that whenever the bell rings, they will be notified instantly. So they were quiet, and they were quietly playing blackjack. So the tension actually increased because, playing blackjack in the middle of the night quietly was just, well, it was a little bit, unnerving. So while they were quietly playing blackjack in the servants' quarters, suddenly they heard this very, very loud, blood-curdling cry from upstairs. They heard a very, very loud scream from upstairs, like very, very, very horrifying scream from upstairs that just shocked them for a moment. They kind of stood there shocked for a moment because this was very, very loud, and it was in the middle of the night. It was something unexpected. So they kind of stood there for a moment, and then instantly got up and rushed upstairs. All of them, they rushed upstairs, and then while on their ways upstairs, they bumped into Charles. They literally bumped into Charles, and then they continued running. While they were all running upstairs, they could hear the bell ring very, very loud. The bell rang so loud that it hurt their ears literally. Like the bell rang so violently loud, and then they kept running upstairs. So when they got to the second floor, everyone was silent. Like the bell stopped ringing, there was no more screaming, everyone was just dead silent. And then they kept running, and instantly heard a very, very loud bang. Really very, very, very loud bang. And then suddenly silence again. Like after the bang, everyone was just silent, and then they kept running towards the door. So while they got to the door, they were struggling to open it, because the only person that actually had the key was Robert, that was staying inside the room. Was the only person that had the key to this room. So they kept struggling to open the door, they couldn't, and then eventually they were able to kick the door in, as Charles was just standing behind the group of friends as he kept trying to open the door. He was just looking at them. Suddenly they finally were successful, and they kicked the door in, because it's an old door. Obviously the door is old, and then it's not going to be very, very strong anymore. So they kicked the door in and then went into the room. So this particular room, the history behind this room was that the original owners of this room, the owner of the room, locked his crazy brother there, because his brother is a very, very violent and psychopathic human being, psychotic human being that was just very, very violent and crazy and unsafe to be around. So they had to lock him in that room because of how unsafe the brother was. And then while he was locked in this room, he actually died in the room. And it's believed that his ghost is actually haunting this particular room, because whoever comes there always has this experience of seeing shadowy creatures moving around the walls and even on the floor, and then furniture was moving without being touched. So there's always been the room has a very, very crazy history of being haunted by a shadowy object. So they actually came up with a name for this particular thing. They started calling it the nameless thing, and people generally believe that thing was the physical manifestation of evil, in air quotes. That's the physical manifestation of evil. That's what people believe that this evil, mysterious thing that lives in this room is called. So people believe that it's actually the spirit of this brother, of this psychotic brother that was locked in this room and died there. That's what people believe that shadowy object is. So there's been a lot of stories from different owners over the years, different people that have moved into this year. They have different owners that have moved into this room over the years. They've had the same experience of this shadowy creature moving around the walls or moving around the floor, moving furniture around, haunting them. They can feel it. So that's the history of this room. That's why Charles was even scared of going into the room at all. Like over the 10 years of owning this place, he has only came to this room like twice, and that was the only times when he came to the room. Only twice has he ever visited this particular room in the building, because of how haunted and scary that room is. So while all of them entered the room, while the 6 friends, after kicking the door in, they entered the room, and then they could see Robert on the bed, like with his eyes wide open. His eyes was really, really wide open, and then his mouth was very, very large, widely open, like a very, very big grin, like a very, very scary grin. So, and then they looked at him. They see that he was clutching the bed so hard on his face. He was clutching to the bed sheets very, very hard. And then they could look. They saw that the ribbon was yanked so hard that he actually fell out of the ceiling. The ribbon literally fell out of the ceiling because of how hard it yanked. And then they saw his pistol on the ground. And then they also looked across the wall. They saw like a bullet hole across the wall. So when they saw Robert, they thought he had a seizure because of how his eyes were wide open. And then they moved close to him so that they can shake him out of the seizure. But while they touched him, they realized that he did not have any seizure. He was actually dead. Robert was laying on the bed dead with his eyes wide open and then his mouth wide open too. So instantly Charles came in, and then that's called the local coroner to come and pick up Robert's body from that room. So the coroner came and then carried his body out of the room. And then Charles was actually very, very eager to know what caused his death. So they investigated whatever caused it, and then what they came up with was that Robert had actually died out of heart failure. Like, he died of heart failure in that night. That's what they said was the cause of Robert's death. So what everyone in that room believed was that mysterious nameless thing had actually showed up to Robert at some point in the night while he was sleeping in his room alone. The mysterious thing has actually showed up to him and then scared him literally to death. Like, scared him to the point where his heart literally failed. That's what they believe, because I mean, you know, there's a history of this room being haunted by the nameless thing. So what they believe was that the nameless thing must have showed up to Robert at some point in time in the room to come and scare him to death, because he wouldn't believe that he was real. So the nameless thing probably just came out to show him that, you know, I'm real, and I'm very much real, and I'm good scared to literal death. So, you know, your friends just stood there. They were very, very shocked at what they had just witnessed. I mean, it was just very, very unnerving. Like, just a couple hours ago, Robert was eager to go into this room to win the bet, but now he's no more. So they were very, very quiet. They were just quietly looking at each other. So that's how the story of the nameless thing came to be. And then over the years, anybody that moves into this apartment always has the same report about this particular room, that the room is just haunted. The room is just haunted. Everybody that has come to live in this room always says the same thing about the room being haunted, about, you know, furniture was moving around, about cries and wailings coming out of this room because of how haunted the room is. So eventually they had to close down the building, and then Charles had to move out. And then, you know, 50 Berkeley Square is probably still there somewhere in London. I don't know, but that's how the story ended. Alright, so we've come to the end of this edition of, you know, strange mysterious stories that I'm telling on this channel. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Also like, so that it will help the algorithm push my videos to even more interested audience. And then if you enjoyed it, leave a comment. You know, leave a comment. Just interact with the video so that the algorithm knows that people are actually watching it. And I'm going to see you in the next upload. Be sure to have a great day.